Bien, vamos a iniciarle la continuación de la sesión número 4. Agradecemos, por favor, nos podemos ubicar. Esta sesión se denomina igual que la anterior, solamente cambiamos la muestra de países. La sesión número 4, continuación, estado actual y visión prospectiva de las políticas públicas dirigidas a las Mipymes en Centroamérica. Para esta sesión contaremos con la presentación, en primer lugar, de Ishmael Lucien Quiroz, quien es director ejecutivo del Consejo de Desarrollo Económico, Diálogo Público-Privado en la oficina del primer ministro de Belice y es representante de Belize Trade and Investment Development Service. Lo invitamos a que se incorpore con nosotros acá a la mesa principal. Asimismo, a la señora Lisette Muralles, nos puede acompañar. Bien, tal como les mencionaba, el señor Ishmael es director ejecutivo del Consejo de Desarrollo Económico, genera diálogo público-privado en las oficinas del primer ministro de Belice. Básicamente nos ofrecerá un panorama, al igual que el resto de los ponentes, nos ofrecerá un panorama sobre las políticas públicas dirigidas a las Mipymes, en este caso en Belice.
Muy buenas tardes a todos. Como mi lengua natal no es el español, les pido mil disculpas por presentar en inglés. Gracias. So first of all, I would like to thank the organizers for this opportunity to learn, to share, and to tell you a bit about what has been done in Belize and what's ongoing in the realm of public policies to support SME development in Belize. As was mentioned, I'm representing Beltrade, the Belize Trade and Investment Development Service, but I'm actually the director of the Department of Public-Private Sector Dialogue in the Office of the Prime Minister. This unit, this department, serves as the Secretariat of the Economic Development Council of Belize, which is comparable to competitiveness councils in Central and Latin America. And what it is mandated to do is to address development issues, private sector development issues, through policy reform. And I'll be very interested to tell you a bit about some of the policy reforms that we've been addressing and dealing with and actually introducing into law that support SME development in the country. We've actually entitled this presentation, The Belize Experience, because it's very important, and I think this is a great opportunity as we share and we learn from the OECD best practices as well as regional and global experiences, that we all understand where exactly we come from, what our contexts are, because we are all unique, and it's important that the policies that we introduced, and I know that there's a move to streamline, to standardize, but it's important that, that our own contexts are taken into account because we all have our own limitations as well as our own opportunities. And it's also a good experience for Belize to be presenting in the context of Central America because we are very much a part of Central America. However, for historical, cultural, and language reasons, we're primarily included in the Caribbean. And in reality, we are a part of the Caribbean single market and economy as a member of the Caribbean community. But increasingly important, it's important that we look to Central America for opportunities to trade, to learn, to develop, and grow. And so it's important that we're here learning from our colleagues in Central America. Just to give you an overview of what the presentation will cover, I think it's important to look at Beltrade as an organization and what it has gone through to where it is now. One of the things to know about Belize is that small population, 350,000 people, and so naturally there are limited resources, both human and financial. And so we have an organization, Beltrade, that is mandated to do a varying spectrum of different functions. The good thing is that they each have distinct units, roles, that guide and govern their activities, but they're all housed within one organization, which in some countries might be a bit strange because other countries have their own dedicated units. So we'll go over that. We'll have a snapshot of what Beltrade does. And specifically looking at the Small Business Development Center unit, as well as the Export Belize unit. We'll touch base on three main governing policies and strategies that impact on MSME development, as well as look at our challenges, key challenges, as we try to implement the policies and strategies that we have. And we'll also highlight some specific initiatives that have been successful to varying extents, but that still have their limitations and some challenges. So going right into it, we have a quick snapshot of what Beltrade has gone through in its evolution. Started off as a trade and investment promotion service in 1998. And over the years, it has acquired various mandates. Beginning in 2007, it was given the mandate to support SME development. And then in 2011, it was redesigned to incorporate investment promotion and facilitation, as well as SME development. In 2004, the export components, as well as job training mandates were added. And so basically we have the organization with units entitled Belize Invest, Belize Training and Education Development Services Center, the Small Business Development Center, and Export Belize. In terms of our best practices, the SBDC model is one that is quite familiar in Central and Latin America. However, Belize was the first country in the Caribbean to actually pilot an SBDC model. It has been extremely successful, and the rest of the Caribbean is learning a lot from our experience. Our resources are very thin, but we've been able to accomplish quite a lot with the SBDC model in Belize. And of course, we know that the SBDC model provides technical and business management training to entrepreneurs and MSMEs through one-on-one business advising and mentoring. The different types of clients that the SBDC interacts with are categorized across different tiers, including pre-ventures, informal businesses, startups, and established businesses. Export Belize is actually one of the newer units of Beltrade that provides very high-level technical support to export-ready businesses on the one hand, who are gearing up to expand their activities, their outputs, and access export markets. And again, this is done through one-on-one tailored mentoring and business advice to those export-ready businesses. Other businesses are also included in terms of ones who are interested in expanding their volumes and exploring export opportunities. So there is a different tier system for addressing those as well. Now, our governing policies and strategies include the National MSME Development Policy, which was prepared in 2012, and which has to varying levels of success being implemented. A key missing link is the enabling access to finance element. And the same goes for the National Entrepreneurship Strategy, which was prepared in 2014. A lot has been done to provide support services, but the access to finance component is something that is still a weak area. Most recently, or as a matter of fact, the National Export Strategy for Belize has existed since about 2006, but it was never fully adopted, and it is in the process now of being adopted formally and implemented. Now, the National MSME Development Policy has as objectives to increase capital flows to MSMEs through policy and legislative changes, and to enhance business and entrepreneurial skills of MSME owners and managers, promoting access to markets and increasing the competitiveness of MSMEs, as well as enabling MSMEs to access human, financial, technological resources to access markets more easily. This is a brief snapshot of what those 4 pillars cover in addressing development of MSMEs at the micro and the small and medium-sized enterprise levels. And so we have the pillars, legislative and regulatory framework for the micro sector, bringing formalization, as was explained in some of the previous presentations. But this is a definite drive, and so I'm quite interested and keen to know what some of the best practices and experiences are for achieving this. For the small and medium-sized enterprise level, under the legislative framework, the idea is to provide transparent legislative and regulatory platforms so that MSMEs can, one, have incentives to grow, develop, as well as, and that's primarily through tax reform, and as well as access technical assistance for through business development services. And this goes across the different pillars, including increasing the flow of capital, so expanding microfinance for micro enterprises, and in general, accessing or enabling access to affordable finance for MSMEs in general. On market access and competitiveness, building linkages and links with the value chain is important. Again, for SMEs, value chain linkages and access are critical points. On education and training, building a culture of entrepreneurship is a main focus, as well as building skills, knowledge, and ICT skills in particular. Our 2 sections in red are areas that are weak links that we still have a lot of work to do. So the access to finance, as was mentioned previously, is a critical factor. This is a key thing that has come out of our MSME policy and strategy. So more or less a definition of what SMEs are. We see a unification of the criteria for what exactly an MSME is, and it goes across number of employees, annual sales, level of investment, and manufacturing space. And so this is what has generally been promoted as the definition for Belize as to what are micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises. This morning there was a question about the agricultural small businesses, and we actually have included in our policy a definition for businesses, farmers operating in this agricultural sector, and it's based on the parameter of acreage. So, and then it's also divided across different types of agriculture. So for grazing animals, small enterprises would be classified as 6 to 3 acres. Medium-sized enterprises are 31 to 60 acres. In the poultry sector, small enterprises or small farms are half an acre, and medium-sized poultry farms go up to 1 acre. For vegetable production, small farms are typically 2 acres in size, and medium-sized vegetable farms, go up to about 3 acres. It's important, and I think it's important to discuss agriculture, especially in the Central American context, because agriculture forms a major part of our economic activity right across the board. For Belize, agriculture is comparable to tourism at 35% contribution to GDP. So for us, it's important that we are able to address the issue of what support is needed to the agricultural sector, at least at the small farm level. As mentioned, tourism is a critical component of our economic activity in Belize. And for the purposes of tourism, the criteria include employment and annual sales only. The National Entrepreneurship Development Strategy, which is our second main public policy to support MSME development, has as its objectives the support of industry, enabling access to affordable financing, promoting institutional coordination, influencing mentality and cultural attitudes towards entrepreneurship, as well as mainstreaming entrepreneurship across the educational curriculum. So really bringing about a change in perspectives that have traditionally been negative towards entrepreneurship. Primarily, as we know, sometimes it's seen as out of need, rather than looking at entrepreneurship as an opportunity to really create value. An interesting point to note in Belize is that the profile of who an entrepreneur is, based on, for example, only 25% of entrepreneurs being younger than 35 years, is that for the most part, for a long period of time, even now, the vast majority of entrepreneurs are people who are retired. So people who have worked typically in the public service or have lived abroad, and then they return home upon retirement, or they retire from public service, and then enter into entrepreneurial activity. And for the greater part of our entrepreneurship profile, that's what an entrepreneur looks like. It's changing now through education, through the cultural shift that we're investing in, to bring about more interest from especially young people to participate in entrepreneurship. This is important because as we go into a more technologically advanced world, added value services and products through are increasingly important to add wealth and to create opportunities for people to create wealth for themselves. Under the National Entrepreneurship Strategy, we have these main pillars: supporting industry through incubation programs and innovation labs, financing, so seed capital and tax incentives, which, as you can see, is in red, an area of weakness where we have not been able to achieve much. Institutional articulation through strengthening national entrepreneurial networks and promoting joint structure ecosystems. Disseminating entrepreneurial success stories nationally through media campaigns is one of the ways in which we're going about investing in changing the mentality and culture. And on the educational system improvement, or at least mainstreaming entrepreneurship, what is being done a lot is doing activities that engage young people in the school systems in entrepreneurial activities. So it could be a small business competition, for example. And actually, very interestingly, what is happening a lot now is coupling environmental protection, conservation, and sustainable development with entrepreneurship. So we're having a lot of activities right now at the tertiary level education system that include competitions that promote this type of model to business. Training of trainers is also a key activity under this. As was mentioned, our challenges include enabling affordable financing for MSMEs. And several items have been in discussion, for example, of a mobile asset registry, but it's very slow in coming on stream. There is legislative change that needs to happen to accommodate this, and so that's a slow process. So I'm very keen to know what can be done to fast track those activities and mechanisms. There's also been a lot of support for the credit union sector. Credit unions are integral to the financial system in Belize. About 35% of the population belong to credit unions as opposed to formal banks or traditional financial institutions. And so strengthening credit unions at the governance level, as well as in being able to be innovative, to design new products, to actually roll out real microfinance, is something that has been an area that has been invested in Belize. And of course, in general, training credit officers, both at banks and development banks, credit unions, is an activity that is currently ongoing that I'll touch on towards the end of the presentation. Those were some of the recommendations for micro enterprises. For small and medium enterprises, loan guarantee programs with participating financial institutions that's participating in training programs are being done. Promoting equity financing of SMEs, either directly or through tax credits, is also a key area that we're working on, and instituting a credit reporting system. Again, these areas in red are areas that are very green, so to speak, in their level of maturity and implementation status. So there's a lot of work to be done on that, in that aspect. For export, again, you will see that finance, access to finance is lacking in getting MSMEs that participate in export or or areas that have, or activities that have export potential. It's still an area that is lacking. Some specific initiatives that have been extremely successful for us in Belize have been establishing memorandums of cooperation, at least in the case of Beltrade, with various financial institutions. And it's good to note that this list of financial institutions span a spectrum of different types of financial institutions. So you have a bank, you have a credit union, you have a development bank, as well as a national bank that's still in progress, actually. But having experience with different types of institutions is important in order to learn what's important for different types of institutions. And a lot of the time that goes back to what they're actually legally able to do with respect to small and medium enterprises. Promoting entrepreneurship has been an area of much activity through Beltrade. And so under this point, we've actually participated in the Emprende program that has graduated in its first year 18 entrepreneurs who had access to seed financing at the end of their participation, to doubling that amount the second year around, with increasing demand in general. But remember our scale. We're very, very small in terms of population, and so some of these numbers are quite important for us. We've also participated in other programs, including a program of eliminating violence against women that has provided seed financing to participating women entrepreneurs for them to be able to grow their businesses. There's also been some very interesting collaborations with, for example, the Audubon Society, to link people participating in fishing activities to be able to have better access to best practices to either be more sustainable or to diversify their economic activities. And so those have been quite interesting. That point, that information also covers point 3 on the financing of startups and through grant programs. Angel investment networks is something that we continue to explore, but we have yet to actually identify a model that works well for Belize. Participation in Global Entrepreneurship Monitor is something that we've recently been able to accomplish, and it's a learning exercise. I think realizing that there's so much data that we don't have to report it's important for us to know, but it's more important for us to now act on it and to begin to collect the data that is actually important to go into those indicators. I previously worked for the Inter-American Development Bank in private sector development, and I did that job for 7 years in designing technical assistance programs to support small and medium enterprises. One of my projects was actually the technical cooperation project entitled Expanding Access to SME Finance and Business Development Services in Belize. And this project is actually being implemented by Beltrade through its SBDC unit. This project was interesting and innovative for us because it provided capacity building not only for entrepreneurs and SMEs, MSMEs, but specifically also to financial institutions to enable them to know better how to actually manage SME portfolios. And that has been, it has been extremely successful. It has effectively linked and closed an information gap between what SMEs need in order to access finance more easily, but also what banks need in the quality of business planning, in the quality of what is actually needed for them to be able to on-lend to MSMEs. And so it's an interesting activity that's an interesting model that has supported capacity building for MSMEs as well as financial institutions, but it has also provided capacity building to business advisors at Beltrade. And so it's the type of thing that shows how Beltrade has been successful in providing business support and business development services to MSMEs. And that's great, that's good. However, the weak link for us is being able to promote access to finance. The Economic Development Council, which is the unit that I head, is actively addressing the issue of policy reform to, one, bring about tax reform, to enable simplification, to reduce tax rates, especially for MSMEs, and then also spanning the spectrum to, for example, trade license reform to make trade licenses more affordable for formal businesses to be able to afford, and more predictable, more standardized across the country's municipalities, as well as more fair. So those are some areas of concrete examples of policy reform that we expect will directly feed into MSME development when they're actually implemented, and they are in the process of being implemented now. So I hope that gives you a snapshot of what Belize's profile is, as well as what Beltrade is doing, what has been successful, but also what some of the challenges are. Thank you.